All right, tonight we're going to be working on the homework for Chapter 4. Chapter 4 talks about the topics that we see listed here. So a couple of really important topics in Java, by the way. The first one is understanding blocks and scope. So we're going to talk about that as we kind of go through the exercises. We're going to also talk about what it means to overload a method, which is kind of interesting. And then we're going to also start to look at some other high-level concepts, including using constructors. Now, we were just talking about Chapter 3 and that game zone exercise where it was missing a constructor. And in this chapter, we will start to create those constructors and see how they're used. And I think that'll kind of open up a lot of thoughts and possibilities here. We're also going to use this thing called this. So maybe I should make that bold. But this, we will have a talk about this, but it's not what I'm talking about now. We will also look at static fields and a couple of other things as we move forward. My intent here is not to really pull out the PowerPoint or the book and lecture. I really kind of want to start just going into the exercises, and as we're working on the exercises, I will talk about those topics because the exercises will kind of dictate it. We will be working on exercises 1, 2, 4, and 5, and I'm just jotting those down on my notebook here, so I don't have to keep looking back here for that. And I am going to get that up on the screen here. I guess I closed the book sooner than I should have, right? So there was a reason I had it open. All right, I just want to get us to exercise 1 here. All right, so the first exercise is this one. It says, create a class named FormLetterWriter that includes 2 overloaded methods. So that's one of our new topics here. Named DisplaySalutation. So 2 methods. So in other words, in that class file, we're going to add 2 methods with the same name. And this is kind of a new concept. And the first method takes 1 string parameter that represents the customer's last name, and it displays the salutation, Dear Mr. or Miss, followed by the last name. The second one accepts 2 string parameters. One is the first name, one is the last name, and then it displays a different message or greeting, Dear, followed by the first name, a space, and the last name. After each salutation, display the rest of a short business letter, whatever you want it to say, thank you for your recent order, whatever, and then close it out. And then you're going to create a separate method that's going to test each overloaded method. Now, we're going to do this kind of collectively, and you'll see what I mean by that. But let's go ahead and get Eclipse up and running. Now, I just had my Java 2 class, so I need to close my workspace from Java 2 and switch workspaces. So give me just a moment to do that. We are in Java Programming 1 this evening, so we are switching our workspace. And you can see what Eclipse does is it kind of closes itself, and now it's really relaunching itself, but it's going to be opened up in a different set of folders. And that's what I want to do. I want to keep my Java 2 work separate from my Java 1 work. And so we'll just give that a moment to get caught up here, and hopefully you guys have yours kind of in the same mode. Yeah, it took a little while. I must be pushing my machine pretty hard tonight. All right. So these are all the exercises we had open from last time. I'm going to go ahead and close all those. We don't need those on the screen. And I'm going to begin by creating a new Java project to hold the work for Chapter 4. That's my intent here. So I'm going to create a Chapter 4 Java project. All right. I'm also going to go ahead and open up the Package Explorer here. It collapsed down for some reason because I like to see what I'm working with. And then I'm going to right-click and create a new class file. And then I think most of you are kind of on board with me here. This one should be called Form Letter Writer. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is, notice I'm clicking the public static void main so we don't have to type that. Is this one is not going to use an external class file. I don't know if you guys noticed that in all of this. This one is going to be all internal on one program. Really what we're demonstrating here is the concept of overloading a method. That's really the main takeaway. So in order for us to do that, we have to create the pieces that we're asked for. So going back to those instructions one more time, two overloaded methods named display salutation. So we're going to create two methods called that. You know what? We can just start creating them straight away. And so the first thing you can do is this. So some people will go like this. And this is okay if you do it like this, by the way. Just say, oh, they want me to create this method. So they'll type public static void display salutation. Totally spelled wrong. Salutation, like that. Parentheses, curly brackets, and I have my method, right? Now, they did say that I should be feeding in a string variable, so I'm just going to go ahead and type string, and I'm just going to call this name. Okay. And in fact, I think when we only send in one variable or one object, they wanted us just to do the last name, if I remember correct. All right. Now, if I was going to call this from the main program body, all I would really need to say is display salutation, like so, and then feed into it whatever it's expecting. So I might just feed in something like Smith, last name Smith, right? What this method is supposed to do is put a message on the screen. They gave us a very specific message though, right? So they said it should say, dear Mr. or Miss, whatever the last name is, because they didn't give us the first name apparently, so we're just giving it a last name here. And so I would type something like this: system.out.println, and then inside here I get my double quotes going, and I would say dear Mr. and Miss or Ms. or whatever you want to do these days. Put a space after it, and let's then just append that last name to it. So dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Now some of you would stop right there. Okay. Now and that might be fine. However, I want you to think about how these system out print lines work, right? Usually when we do like a business style letter, we don't go right from the salutation right to the body of the letter. Usually we have a blank line. So I'm going to put a blank line in. And then we'll probably have the need to have whatever the standard form letter is. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. You're going to have to type in your own, by the way, but I'm taking a shortcut. Okay, so here's my shortcut. And I'm doing this so that we can get through the most number of exercises tonight. What you guys could do instead of this is kind of copy what I'm doing, but just put in a shorter message for now. So what I did is I put in another method I created that I called order thanks. And all this does is it's a whole series of statements. And so notice what I did. I said, thank you for your recent order. We hope you enjoyed the stuff you bought. You overpaid for that junk. Oh, sorry. But it's too late to return it now. A blank line, sincerely, another blank line, Amazon.com, a blank line, and then a dotted line at the bottom. That's what I decided to do. Right. So you might just have something that says, thank you for your order, and call it a day. Sincerely, whatever your name is. But this is what I did. I'm just kind of putting it up on screen so you guys can see it for a little bit, think about it, and see how easy this is. But this method is not only going to put this message on the screen, but we're also going to have it type up the rest of the message, right? And all we have to do to make that happen is just call that method. This method will put all this stuff on the screen automatically. I just do my dear Mr. and Mrs., a blank line, and thank you, and we're done. Now, I guess I could be clever. I could actually take this blank line, right? I could actually put it here, and you know what? Now I'm going to do it because it is more clever. And then this method up here just does system out print line, dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and then types all that. right? So that shows us sending one variable here to one method. So one variable is traveling, one parameter is being passed, or one argument is being received. That's all the correct syntax. Now I'm going to actually demonstrate this already. And so all that's going to happen is it's just going to put all the text on the screen. You guys realize that. But let's see it in action and see it actually working. All right, so it's compiling here. There's my console. You notice my console's not pinned to the bottom here. And now I got to go hunting for it. All right, that's not really very elegant. All right, let's go back. And this is where we want to reset our workspace. So all my toolbars got collapsed here, so I got to find my console. There we go. Isn't it fun to watch your teacher fumble with? There we go. All right, there it is. All right, but this is what came out in the console. So there's my form letter. I will admit this doesn't look too great, but hey, at the time when I did it originally, we thought it was really clever. So that was during a different class. We did it for some reason. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to just adjust this a little bit now, and we're going to add the next method to it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lose that. In fact, I could probably lose the bottom two lines and it'll still work great. And now I'm going to create the overloaded version of the same method. Since it's going to have the same name, you know what? Why not just copy the whole thing? Let's just do that. Copy the whole method. I'm just going to come down here, paste it in again. And the difference is going to be this. Now you notice that when they're both named the same, Eclipse isn't liking that too much. In fact, if you hover, it says rename the method. All right. It's not giving you the overload option, but what we're going to do is we're going to create the ability here for us to send in more than one variable at a time, or more than one parameter at a time. And so now I have the capability of throwing in the first name and the last name in that order. And I'm going to change my output here to go from dear first name, and then a space. You're gonna have to manually force the space in, by the way. Dear, Joe, whatever, and that will print out, and then the rest of the letter will print out. We can test that really, really simply. We just adjust this one, and now we're going to send in two values. And we're going to say John Smith. And remember, these are strings, right? So they have to be hard-coded like string values to go in here. And what this is showing us is that we can have a method of the same name that accepts a different number of parameters. That one accepts one, this one accepts two. And now notice, even now they're named the same now, they're not flagging red, because this gives us flexibility. So we can run this with one parameter going in, or we can run it with two parameters going in. And maybe we'll call this like John Doe or something like that. All right, let's run this now. So we're saving. And then I'm going to pull up the console window so you can see the whole thing, because it's going to print it out twice. So it's going to do one form letter and then another form letter. All right. So that's not really very pretty, by the way, because both letters are being squeezed onto one screen. But there's the first where it's Dear Generic Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And here's the second one that actually shows the first name. And now I understand why I put that line in there. Now you guys get it? Because now I'm getting why. So the reason I had this in there originally, where I had a blank line and then another line that had a bunch of dashes in it, was just to keep those two letters separate. And so here's the result with that back in. So that way I can see when one ends and the other starts. And I could probably even be more clever, by the way, and put another blank line after. I think that would even look better. So you always see like the better way to do it in the aftermath. All right. So there's my finished program. I'm going to just kind of tidy these up a little bit and zoom out. Just a couple clicks. Maybe we can get it all on the screen at the same time. If we're lucky, or real close. So there's the code, folks. It's the main method, display salutation with one parameter, with two, demonstrating that both work. And then each one of these methods is also calling a method itself. All right, that was the form letter writer. Now we're moving on to the next exercise, which is exercise 2. All right, so this one is going to require the creation of an external class file. It says create a class named billing. And that includes 3 overloaded compute bill methods, or do we need an extra class for this one? Any thoughts on that, folks? Okay, nobody's answering. That's okay. But we will have, once again, 3 overloaded methods. So once again, we're doing that same concept where we are overloading the applications, but this time we're doing 3 of them instead of the 1 or 2 that we did previously. So what I'm doing right now is I am pulling this up in my cheat sheet here so we can get started.
This is a single file.
Yeah, this is a single file too. So this will go pretty quick. Let's right click and create a new class again. And thank you for answering, Dennis. I appreciate somebody's looking in the book. And this one they want called billing. We do need a main method here, so let's go ahead and pre-create that. So here we are. I'm going to get rid of the comment here. All right. So I'm going to go back to the instructions really quick because I think it's important to get them right. We are going to create a class named billing that has 3 overloaded compute bill methods. We're going to create 3 things called compute bill. So then it gives us the guideline of what to do. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm not going to remember this. So here's what I'm doing. I'm copying this and I'm just going to take it right into my IDE and I'm going to paste it in at the top using CSS style comment marks and just paste it in. And yes, I realize it's going off the edge of the screen, but I will word wrap that. And just somebody remind me where they put word wrap in this darn program because it's somewhere bizarre.
It's a button at the top. It's next to the highlighted button you got to your right. There you go.
There we go. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
I had to take it for granted that I always leave it left on, but apparently not. But now the reason I did that is now I don't have to go back and forth and look at this. It's right there, right? And then I can get rid of them or leave them or whatever I want to do. But one thing I know for sure is that I'm going to need to do a couple of things here. The first thing that I notice is they are going to have, and I'm sorry that I got caught in that little mode here, this thing where we're often computing a tax rate. So one little helpful tip. A tax rate in a program is one of those things that you probably will not be futzing with too much. And so what a lot of programmers do is when they're dealing with something that is kind of like a global value that all the different parts of this program are going to need to access, they often will create something like a tax rate as a constant. So I'm going to start with creating a constant. I'm going to spell that right though. And then I'm going to call it tax, all uppercase, because that's the convention. And the tax rate that we're dealing with, I noticed, is 8%. So that's 0.008. So I'm just hard coding that as a constant. All right. The next thing that I want to do is think about the fact that I need these 3 different methods called the same thing. So why not just go ahead and start creating these? And I don't think any of these are returning values if I read it right. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But all of them will be called compute bill. I know that these will need stuff thrown in there, but I'm not worried about that yet. I'm actually going to go ahead and just kind of create this part of it hey, I know I need 3 of these, right? So why not just make them right away? I don't know if your brain thinks that way or not, but mine does. I always look for little shortcuts on where I can save a little bit of hassle, basically. All right. So we know that these two will flag red. You notice right now they're not flagging at all. Isn't that interesting? Because they don't have any parameters put in there yet. If you're uncomfortable with things flagging red while you're working on other things, you might want to comment these out. So you could use the same CSS style commenting here if you wish to just deactivate them temporarily so you can test the first one. But let's go ahead and think about what has to happen inside of this bill. So let's look at this first little thing. It says, when compute bill receives a single parameter, it represents the price of one photo book ordered. Add 8% tax and return the total due. So wait a second. Now it sounds like we are returning something, right? Well, that's this piece here. So whenever you say something here, this is the data type that you're returning. We already learned this. That's why this says double and not void. So this will have a return statement built in. Now, the calculation they're talking about is pretty darn simple. So they're saying once we receive the price of something, and prices typically will be in the form of a double, by the way, and let's just call the variable coming in the amount, whatever that amount is. And so we're going to create a value or a variable, if you will, to store it. So I'm going to say the amount. So how do we do this exactly? It represents the price of one photo book ordered. How do I determine how much tax? So if I buy something at the store, and this is really a good question. So I walk in and I buy a can of soda for $1, but there's tax on it. How do I represent that mathematically? Do I just say amount plus tax? I mean,
Yeah,
that right. But will that work?
you take the price times the tax in parentheses and then add it to the
Ah,
price.
Thank you, sir. So you usually have to do a separate calculation. So one calculation is to multiply the amount by the tax just to get the tax amount, then add the amount of whatever you're buying, and then that will be the total. So that's how you figure it out. Now, there's some other clever ways to do this, by the way. So let me just give you a couple of what ifs here. One other way I see people do it is they'll go, well, the amount plus the amount, right? People are like, that's wrong. That's wrong. No, no, no. Hold on a second. Times the tax. That's also valid, right? Because when you look at the order of operations, the multiplication will happen first, even without parentheses, by the way. So some people will see this and go, amount plus amount, well, that's like amount times 2. That's wrong. No, no, no. Multiplication first, then addition. Another way you could do it, and I'm putting in double slashes there, and this is an old trick I learned a long time ago when programming cash registers, is you can just say whatever the amount is times not 0.08, but what some people do is they go 1.08, and that's the same because then you're keeping the amount in there and you're adding the 8% on top of it. Now, of course, you would have to change this then, but I'm going to go with this approach because I just think it's the clearest to understand. All right, but these are possible alternates. All right, now ultimately we need to return that value, so I'm just going to say return whatever we calculated. Now, the question, of course, you guys could have is, could you just have put this here? And the answer, of course, is yes. I could have just done the calculation directly. In fact, on the next one, maybe I'll do that and it'll be easier. But I like to explain what we're calculating. All right. Now, we probably want to test this. So the very simple way that we can test this is like this. Now, I'm not worried about the final result of the program at this point yet. What I'm just trying to see is, does this method work? That's all I'm trying to do. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to call compute bill. And if I send this a value, let's just say I put in $10. Oops. I don't know what I hit on my keyboard there. I hit one of the function keys by mistake. Right, if I do that, will this work? Now here's how your brain should work on this. This number is going to get sent here. It's going to do the calculation, and then it's going to return. But we have nowhere for that return value to go. So I can't just do this and have it run. What I would need to do to see the result is to feed it into a variable. So I'm going to create another variable, and you know what? I'm going to use the same. I probably shouldn't do that. Why don't we call it total, or total bill? How about like that? So I have to really, if this is bringing back a value, that value has to have somewhere to go. Now I can output that to the screen. I can do my system. There it is again. Next time I'll read the menu. I must be like hitting something on my keyboard that's like clicking the mouse. Weird. All right. And I'm just going to say your total bill is, and then we just want to make sure that it works at this point. That's all we're doing. And we're just going to put total bill. All right. So let's run this, save it, run it, see what happens. Does it even work? And hopefully the answer to that is okay. So did it work or not work?
The total bill, does that have to be declared as a type?
Ah, yeah. There you go. I didn't declare it as a variable. Thank you, sir. Sometimes I catch on. All right, thank you. Let's try that again. Something's going on with my Java program here. You guys, I think I'm locked up again. Can you guys, I'm going to pause the recording for a second. Pretty weird effect, right?
Yeah, I tried using the Java or Eclipse Neon that you were using just now on my laptop, and I couldn't open the code that I had already done
Really?
because I was using the Eclipse or Java development IDE on my desktop. Said it was the Neon was out of date, which was weird.
Yeah, it still works fine though. Apparently not. I shouldn't say that. But apparently it's not working that fine.
Is the Eclipse made with Java?
You probably, you know, that's really funny. It probably is.
It probably is.
It probably is. Oh, we never did the system out print line. It's working great.
Are we still on a few minute break here?
Yes, I'm just trying to get this back to where we had it, basically. And just to prove it works. All right, we're going to continue on. We have still some work to do on this one. We do know that we need to create those other methods. And once again, somewhere on one of my screens is all this ebook stuff. Remember, I dropped it in as a comment. And so I'm going to do that in again. And now that I know where the word wrap button is, I'm going to find it really quick. So we got the first one done. The next one asks us to repeat this again. So not being a fan of reinventing the wheel, or retyping, more frankly, I'm just going to copy and paste that one in. Now we have to add to this, it says up here, when it receives two parameters, they represent the price of the photo book and the quantity ordered. Now, these could be variables and you can write whole applications around it. We're kind of going to deal with this as a hard-coded entities because I just kind of want to plow through and get this done. And so what you might want to do, some people might go ahead and create variables for these things, but I'm going to do it in a much more simplistic fashion. So the first one is going to be the price of the photo book. So amount can work for that just fine. And the quantity ordered. So I'm going to add to this quantity, but what should that be? An integer, right? Because you can't order like partial stuff usually. And let's just call it QTY. All right. Now the calculation that we need to do this is going to be basically we have to multiply the two values and then add the tax and return the total. So here's how we accomplish that one. So some of this is going to be kind of the same. Will we have to change anything here? Well, the one thing that we could start with is we could actually, in fact, why don't we just get rid of that and just say, let's take a different approach on this one. Let's call this subtotal. We're going to create a new variable. And what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply the amount times the quantity ordered. So like if somebody orders like 5 books at $100, for example, that'll go into subtotal. And then to figure out the subtotal with tax, I would then take whatever the subtotal was, right, and do the same calculation I did above, which is the basically adding the subtotal to the subtotal, spelled correctly, times the tax rate. Now I explained that you don't need parentheses on this. I'll put them in anyhow if it makes you feel better. And if you're unsure, I'd say always include them. And then instead of returning bill here, we're going to return subtotal. Now we're going to test this. Okay. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to number these. I'm going to say one param. And now we're going to test this, and we're going to take that that same variable. We're going to like feed in a different value now. So we're going to say total bill equals compute bill, not computer, but compute, with two values going in. The first one being the amount. Let's stick with the same $10 because that's really easy. And how many are we ordering here? 5. That seems pretty reasonable to me. So we want to see how much it costs with tax for 5 books sold at $10 each. And then, of course, we'll do another output statement to test it. And we'll say 2 parameters here. All right, so let's run this and see what happens with it. All right, so 10 books times 5 is 50, is $4 right for tax. 50 times 8, yes it is. That is correct. So it's calculating correctly. All right, now we got to do this one more time. The last one is a little bit more complicated, so we're going to copy this one again, paste in another copy. This third time what we're going to do, so we can get rid of this one now, it's going to receive 3 parameters. They represent the price of the book, the quantity ordered, and a coupon value. Multiply the quantity and the price, reduce the result by the coupon value, and then add tax. Okay, so the third thing we're going to receive is going to be the coupon value. Now, the coupon value will be represented how, do you think? probably as a percentage discount, I'm thinking, right? So if you think of like you walk into like a Joann Fabrics and you have your coupon and you can get your stuff for cheap, right? That's a good example. And that value is probably going to be a double in terms of a data type. And then we can just call it coupon here. Okay. Now we have to do the calculation. So I think our first calculation of amount times quantity is still valid. That can stay. Now we need to take that subtotal though and reduce a coupon value. Now, the coupon value might be something that we predetermine, but maybe it's pretty simple. Maybe it's like, hey, here's a coupon for $20 off your purchase. Maybe that's what the coupon is. So that's how I'm going to treat it. I'm going to actually treat it as a money amount, I think, because I think the math is going to be easier. So I hope you guys did the same thing. So I'm going to take whatever the subtotal is, and I'm just going to subtract whatever the coupon value is. So it might be a $5 coupon, it could be a $10 coupon, or whatever. Right? And then would this calculation still be right for the tax? Yeah, why not? Right? So now to test this, we're going to do the same thing we did here. We're just going to kind of repeat these two lines, and we're going to send in 3 values. So we're going to $10 a book, 5 books, and then our coupon amount is, how about, I don't know, something really odd like $9 off. I don't know why, just because. And then we're just going to indicate that this is the 3rd version. And then I'm just going to go ahead and run this and save it. And so is that correct? Now, so here's where you might want to double check, right? I can take it on faith that it's working right, but if I have books that are selling for $10 and I have 5 of them, that's 50, right? And then if I subtract a $9 coupon, I'm at 41. And then if I multiply by 1.08, do I get 44.28? 44.28 is correct. Of course, you can get a lot fancier with this, folks. And I know a lot of students will. Like they'll create a whole bunch of fancy variables and stuff up here. Some people will go as far as like getting input. If you want to do that, that's fine too. None of it is really necessary. The point of this exercise is that you can have something named the same name, send in more than one amount of parameters or arguments, and this one has 1, 2, and 3, and it still works, right? And you can demonstrate that it works. So this is exercise 2 on billing, demonstrating overloaded methods.
The overloaded method, the arguments that go in, is there a way to like annotate those or let it know in the code for readability reasons what they are?
You know, that's a really good point. So some people do have the habit of when they write these methods, they'll include, and in Python they do this pretty regularly too. So they'll just have, kind of like the Java documentation approach like this, and just say, this method takes, these 3 parameters, whatever, which are, and you specify, and you tell the data types. And if you want to get really formal about it, Dennis, you could say double amount of transaction, QTY, that's an integer, that whatever, you can specify all that here. And there is a formalized format for it. So if like you looked at a Java doc and see how they lay it out,
right?
Yeah, a lot of professional developers, when their methods are complicated, they'll specify that stuff very specifically.
So the Java doc system I would need to look at.
Yeah, if you want to follow like the format that creates these documents, that's totally doable.
Okay.
Right. We don't spend a lot of time on that because we're just trying to get the basics to work.
Yeah.
But that's a really good question. And you know what, folks, when you do become professional programmers, there's entire career paths for people that just write comments.
Really?
Yeah. That's something I want to do. And depending on where you work, some places are really strict about it and some places are not.
Well,
You know, some places are like, it works, that's great. Other places like, what, you didn't document this. You know, so depends on where you have your job. All right, let's move on to the next one. I'm saving this and we are moving on. So the next exercise is what? Does somebody have it? Exercise 4, I believe. Let's bring that over onto the screen here. So exercise 4, here we will be creating an external class file. So it says create a class named blood data that includes fields that hold a blood type. The 4 blood types are an RH factor. The factors are plus and minus. Create a default constructor that sets the fields to O and plus, so we're told what to do, and an overloaded constructor that requires values for both fields. All right, and then we're going to create a test application for that. And so what we're going to do here is the parts that I'm not going to remember are probably this. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this from here and I'm going to put it into my program so I don't have to bounce back and forth. So here I am in chapter 4. I am now going to create a new class file once again. And this one's going to be called blood data. And we do need a main method. All right, so there we are with the with this. Now I created a main method and somebody's catching me here, right? I don't want to do that.
Right. I'm scary to say it.
Yeah, thank you for being astute enough to even recognize that I made the mistake. You get in that habit of clicking that checkbox is what happens, and you keep adding that main method in. Yeah, but at least we can delete it. So no harm done there. We are going to start by just dropping those instructions up here at the top. So I'm just pasting them in, and now I know my magic word wrap button. I'm going to hit this one every time now, Ken.
By the way, for so you know how you make comments, is there a certain way to like wrap the text? Because when I tried to put the comments in there before to just tell me what to do, and like I don't know how to wrap the text.
Right here, Jabari. See this?
Oh, I see that. Is that just a thing in Eclipse?
Yeah, it is. You know, every program will do it differently. And so sometimes I like fumble around these menus because they put them in really, really weird spots sometimes. Like you would think it would be under like the view menu, but then you notice, hey, there's no view menu in this application. And then I start going through all the menus, going, where do you do it? And then I remember with Eclipse, if I'm right about this, you go to properties and you have to like dig into all this like weird stuff. This is a whole lot easier just to hit the button. All right, we have some stuff we have to put in here. So we created a class called blood data that includes fields that hold a blood type, an RH factor. Okay, so that's not very complicated. It's just 2 things, right? So let's go ahead and get that going. So up here at the top, we're going to create a couple of private variables. First one is going to be a string because looks like the name for blood types are, you know, alpha characters. So we're just going to call that blood type. We're not presetting it here. And then we're also going to create a private variable, once again, a string that's going to be our RH factor. That's the negative or positive blood type. All right. So that's the first thing. And then it says create a default constructor that sets the fields to O and positive. So blood type O and RH factor positive. So a constructor inside of a class is really simple, folks. So the first thing is you just name it the same as the class file. So I'm just going to name it blood data exactly the same way. And in this version, we're not sending anything in. This is going to be what we call the default constructor. So one that does not require parameters. And all I'm going to do is set the blood types. And this is really pretty fascinating here, how I'm going to do this. And and it might like kind of blow your mind initially a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just do this manual approach where I'm going to just say blood type. And what's that going to be equal to? Well, type O, because that's what they told us to set it to, right? So we're just going to do that. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the RH factor. And what's that going to be? Well, they told us on that one too. This one is going to be O positive. So now from an external program, when I'm creating a blood data object, it automatically, if I don't specify, it will automatically have blood type O and a positive blood type. And that's the default constructor. Now, the second, okay, so create a default constructor that sets the fields, and an overloaded constructor that requires the values for both fields. And I think that sometimes I get students that miss that little piece of it. And so I'm going to go ahead and create the second constructor now. So I'm actually going to do this. This is going to be kind of weird. I'm just going to paste that whole darn thing. And I'm going to take the default constructor and change it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe this stuff out of here. And you guys are going to go, wait, what are you doing? Watch this really clever trick, basically. So with the overloaded one, where we are going to accept parameters, so I can create it by sending the values in. First thing I'm going to send in the blood type. Then I'm going to send in the RH value, and I'm just creating local variables for that with these names. However, here, I'm going to replace what we're sending in. So this is going to be sent in dynamically now. It's not going to be preset. And so they're coming in as parameters and then going into the thing. Now, because I have a default constructor and then I have an overloaded constructor, I can actually have my default constructor call the overload constructor internal to the class. This is pretty bizarre. And I want you to watch how I'm doing this. And this might be a little bit of a mind bender for you as to how this works initially. Because now we're learning about this thing called this. So what is this? Well, this is this, right? That's the joke. But here's the reality. Whenever you're working with this keyword in Java, what it's referring to is the object itself. So when I'm creating a blood data object, which object is it referring to? Well, whatever's in here, everything. And so when I call this, it's the same as me saying blood data. That's what it means. So when I'm calling blood data itself and then sending it to parameters, well, it can't go to the default constructor. Now it goes to the overload constructor to create itself. So isn't that weird? So I create the overload constructor to facilitate the default constructor. So by running the default constructor, it calls the other one that accepts two parameters, and I'm sending two parameters, and it sets the value, and then it becomes part of the object. So that's probably the weirdest part of this. But the default constructor, if I call it externally, will just create this object with those two values. If I feed in the values, I can control what goes in. So I can type in B positive or A negative or O negative or whatever. I can send those in manually. All right. The other part of this says is include get and set methods for each field. All right. Well, we know how to do that in Eclipse, right? So we have our private data variables up here, and I could go through the process of manually typing in get and set for each one, but let's not. Let's just right click, go to the source menu that comes up, and then generate getters and setters and let Eclipse do it automatically and, more importantly, perfectly without you having to write a line of code. All right. So it created all of those. And so it created, now it made a little bit of a mess of it. You guys notice that? And so I'm going to clean that up. And that was because I had stuff highlighted, and I apologize that I did. But I would arrange it more like this. You know what? Let's just Control Z that, and let's do it again. This time I'm not highlighting. And what I'm going to do is, see where my cursor is? That's where it's going to put the stuff. I want the stuff at the bottom. So I'm going to put it here. Now I'm going to run that command. Right-click source, generate getters and setters, check both data types, both attributes, if you want to call them that, and then run it. And now you see for each one of those, so blood type has a get to return it and a set to set it. I want you to notice the use of the keyword here, because the automatic tool in Eclipse, okay, which object's blood type? This object's blood type, the one we're currently working with. And once again, it happens with the RH factor. When I'm setting it, which one am I setting it on? Whichever one you're working on. That's the answer. And it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but it's self-referring. It's like talking about yourself. All right. Now, believe it or not, this work is done. The class file is complete. The next step of this is to start testing it. And so we can get rid of this comment up here. Now let's think about the stuff that happens externally. All right. Save all that. Now let's go ahead and create another new class file. And if I remember the instructions correctly, they wanted us to call this test blood data.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for validating. Somebody's listening. All right, so I'm going to call this test blood data. We do need this to be an executing program. So I do want the main method. So we're going to run that. Now, the only job that we have here is to run this and see if, is this working? You know, is basically what we're doing. And so I'm going to check the instructions, and it says, create an application named test blood data that demonstrate that each method works correctly. Now, what they mean by the method is they want you to demonstrate the fact that you can create the object with the default constructor, create it with the overload constructor, and then can you put it up on screen to prove that it's working, and then maybe you can change something and display it again. Okay. All right. So now let's ramp this up. So the first part of this is going to be to call in the blood data class. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to call in blood data, and provided that I put it in the same folder. Now, why is it highlighting red? Well, here's the answer. I haven't saved this yet. Now that red line should go away as soon as I give this a name. So we'll create an object. I need to give it a name. I'm just going to go with B1 because that's what I used last time. And now I'm going to instantiate a new blood data object with the default constructor, nothing inside the parentheses. So what that means is this will call this version, which calls the other version and adds the stuff to the object. Pretty cool, right? Well, I think it's cool. All right. Maybe you don't. All right. Let's create another one right away to prove that it's working. We'll just call that one B2. Now, B2, we want to overload the constructor. So I'm going to preset A, blood type A, and let's just make it A negative. So with this one, I'm sending in the values. This version will go directly to this method that I have highlighted that accepts 2 parameters. All right, so we're saving this so far. Next, I want to show that it's working. You know what? I think it might be kind of helpful if we create a method that helps us to do that, that does a display, basically. So let's just go ahead and create public static void, and let's just call it display. And what are we going to send into it? We're going to send into it a blood data object, which I'm just going to refer to as the letter B. Put in our curly brackets, and all that this thing is going to do is a system out print line. So we're just going to system.out.println. Now, why am I creating this as a method? Because I want to do this multiple times to prove that it's working, and I don't want to have to type system out println 20 times. I just want to type it once. So this here, I will say the blood type is, and we will concatenate to that, a return of the value from the object. So whatever object we're being sent has embedded into it now, either by default or by overload, values for the blood type and the RH factor. And so all I have to do is ask for it through the get. So I'll say b.get blood type. See how it just brings it up automatically. That pulls back the blood type. And right next to it, I want the positive or the negative side. So I'm going to say b dot get RH factor. I'm going to add a semicolon to the end here. Then I'm going to come up to the main method. Now I need to call this method, but I need to send something into it. So first I'm going to display my B1 object. Then I'm going to display my B2 object. Okay. Let's go ahead and run it as is. This is enough to prove that it actually works. So I'm saving, and now I'm running. Let me get my console window here ready. So here's the run on this. So the default one, B1, right? I didn't send in parameters, so it's O positive like it's supposed to be. The second one, which I sent in A and A negative, is now A negative. Interestingly, if you really want to like test this further, you could do something like this. And this is frankly optional, but I did this last time to kind of demonstrate to my class. And yes, the paste wasn't beautiful, but people are like, well, once you've created that B1 object and you've sent it no values and it's set to default, can you change it? Yes, you can. And that's what the set methods are for. So I'm using the set method attached to this object to set the blood type to a different value and a different RH factor and then redisplay it. So let's see what that looks like. So here's that first one by default. Second one, we told it to be that way. And then the first one changed and then proved that we changed the object. Right. Now, very simplistic example here, but very powerful at the same time, because what it's showing you is you can use a blueprint to create an object. You can have two different kinds of constructors here. The overloaded constructor can help the default constructor. We have gets and sets for everything in private data fields. Then we come over to a program like this. We create a couple versions of the object. We display them to make sure they're actually working right. Then we change one of them and show that that worked right too. That's the anatomy of what we just did. But what it demonstrates on a really simplistic level is the ability to create that blueprint, which defines what an object's capabilities are, and then how we can create multiple instances of that object that are independent of each other, but still are exactly the same thing at the same time, which is kind of a mind blower, I think. But that's a really good example of overloading constructors, this method, and a bunch of other little aspects. All right. Any questions on this one? All right. This one is successfully complete, folks. And now we are moving on to, we got a part B. Darn it. Yeah, I thought we were out of the woods here. I thought we were going to get to exercise 5. All right. It says create a class named patient that includes an ID number, age, and blood data. Oh, wait a second. I see. So we're going to create a class that calls on another class. So now we're going down the rabbit hole a little bit, right? But it's totally possible. So here's conceptually what we're going to do. We're going to create another class file kind of like this. And then that class file will call upon this class file to get the blood type. And then a separate program will prove that it worked. All right, that's the whole thing we're doing. So why don't we begin by going ahead and creating the new class file. Can somebody tell me what name they want me to use? Is it patient?
Yes, patient.
Patient. And this is going to be what we use as our blueprint file, if you want to think of it that way. So we don't need a main method, right? This is going to serve as the superclass for the objects that are created from it. All right. Next aspect is we need to get the right fields in here as indicated by the book. So really quick, look at the book. And once again, if it helps you, do something like this, copy the stuff in, drop it in as comments. So you have it available. And now we have the magic word wrap button there. So now we know right off the bat, we're going to need some private variables. So ID number, age, and blood data. So let's kind of walk this path here a little bit. So these are all going to be private variables. And often when we think about these class files, one correlation I sometimes make to people is these class files and the way that we name these private variables, we often call them attributes. Another way to look at these class files are as like entries in a database table. So this is kind of interesting when you start to think about it like that, with these private variables really indicating the column headers of a spreadsheet or a database table. If you think about it like that, and some of you might be taking the database class right now, and I want you to try to make this correlation as we do this. But the ID number, I'm going to put in as a string. Some people might say, that should be a number. Well, you know what? Most systems, by the way, when they do ID numbers, they tend to be strings for a lot of different reasons. But I'm going to make mine a string. Do another private variable here. This one is going to be an integer for age. And then the weird one is now we're going to use what we call a custom data type. Here's some terminology for you, because we're going to pull in the blood data type or class really, and I'm just going to call it blood data here internally like this. So it's slightly different name, but it's indicating that we're going to have this thing called blood data, which is of type blood data, which means it has all these features attached to it. And that's going to be attached directly to each patient is going to have that. All right, let's go ahead and save this. All right. Provide a default constructor that sets the ID number to 0 and the age to 0 and the blood data values to 0 and positive. Hey, that sounds familiar, right? So here's how we do that. Let's go ahead and create the default constructor. That is simply going to be named, it's going to be public, and it's going to be called patient. Parens and curlies. All right. Now the default constructor is not going to have anything passed into it. We're going to preset the stuff. So I can just go ahead and say ID equals, well, it's going to have to be a 0, right? Even though it's a number, it's going in as a string. And then what about, it says, provide a default constructor that sets the ID number to 0, the age to 0, and the blood data values. So how would I do the blood data thing then? Well, here's
Age is an integer.
Oh, thank you, sir. See, somebody catches it. I would have caught it when I compiled, Dennis. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I've already indicated that we have a private variable declared up here of type blood data. So I can just use that by name with the name I gave it. Granted, that's not really the best of names. And I'm constructing a new version of it. So I can just say new blood data right here, just like this, empty constructor. That's going to travel off to this file. And because it's empty, it will hit this method. And then it will call upon itself with an overload, which will go to this method and set the values and return the object. That's what's, conceptually happening here. So by doing this, I'm setting the blood type to 0 and positive as indicated. All right, so there's the default constructor. Create an overload constructor that provides values for each field. All right, and also provide get. Notice it doesn't say set, just get. But you know what? You can do sets if you want to. However, let's do the overload constructor. So we're going to copy this. Paste it in again. And now we're going to accept all of these things as parameters. Now, I'm trying to save a little bit of time here. So yes, I'm doing a little copy pasting. And so I'm going to have a string for ID. So we're sending it in. An int for age. We're sending it in. A string for blood type and a string for our H factor. Keeping in mind that these two are handled elsewhere, by the way, not here. But we can still receive them here. So what happens on the inside here? Well, here's what's going to happen. We're going to change this to say this, because we're going to be self-referring now because the object's being created, and we're going to pull in the ID. Same way, we're going to do the same thing to age. We're going to say this dot age, and once again, we're going to pull in age from the parameter list here. Now with the blood data, we're going to keep this statement. However, now we're going to add blood type and RH factor as parameters. So I'm just going to copy these in one at a time. And see, my trick here of double clicking and copying them rather than retyping them is one way to not make a mistake, although the auto type feature can do that for you as well. So I'm sending in the blood type and the RH factor. Now, the direction is they just want get methods. Now, there's a reason for this. I want you to think about this. If you provide a method for an object and you are allowing somebody to set a value as well as get the value, getting it is just looking at it. Setting it is changing it. Maybe they don't want other applications changing the patient information. Isn't that interesting? So they have a records person that's pulling a person in, typing in the stuff. They have the right blood type. It's set. It's not like that blood type's going to change, right? So they don't want some other application to have the ability to change it mistakenly. And so that's why they say also provide get methods and say it's nothing about set. But you can still use the automatic tools. And so here's what I would do. I would put my cursor where I want those things. I would do the right click, source, generate getters and setters, pick all three, right? Or if you expand, so here's the cool part of this tool. I can choose, what did it say? Also provide get methods, not set. So I can come in here, expand all these, and uncheck set. And now it'll just create get. So it'll only allow you to retrieve the information right there. All right, pretty darn simple, folks. So this is the completed patient class file with all the required methods. I've truncated it a little bit so you can get it all on screen, and I can get rid of this little piece. All right, so now we got to prove that it works. Let's get to that. Save this. And next step. Next step is create an application that demonstrates that it works. All right, so now we're going to do test patient. And I'm going to try to do this as fast as I possibly can. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a whole bunch of copy pasting. I'm going to go ahead and create the class file. I'm going to create it and call it test patient. Yes, I saw the capital A, fixing it. We will need a public static void main because this will be an executing program. All right, so there it is. All right, so let's demonstrate that this stuff works. So here's what I'm going to do. I know this is going to go fast. We're going to create two patients. One patient is going to be created with a default constructor. So we're sending no information. It's like creating an empty file in a sense. The second patient is going to have an ID number, an age, and a blood type specified. Right? Next thing we want to do is we want to show that this is working. Now, once again, we're going to copy a technique we used before, which is I'm going to create a display method that's just going to do the heavy lifting on that. And here's what it looks like. So I just created a method called display. What are we sending to it? A patient object. So within it, it's just referred to as the letter P, right? When we get inside here, we're going to pull from that patient. Notice the get blood data, and we're going to store it in the blood data container, right? To be able to output it back to the screen. And then from here, we're going to just do an output that says patient number, patient get ID. That's what that says. Age, patient get age. New line, it's a new line character. The blood type is, and then we're pulling back the blood type and the RH factor and putting it on the screen. So let's try that. It's pretty simple. So I'm going to paste this in twice here. So 2 calls to display. First, sending in the first patient, Next, sending in the second patient. Let's see if this works. So let's save our work. Let's hit the run button here. Watch it compile. Patient number 0, age 0, blood type is O positive, right? Why is that happening? Because the default constructor presets the ID and age, and then we know the default constructor for blood data does O positive. So we know that that's working. With the second one, that's not what I meant to do, by the way. The ID number 1234, age is 35, blood type is B positive. It all seems to be working. Now you can play with this a little bit too. And so I always recommend, if you're doing stuff like this, goof around with it a little bit. Maybe you'll find some, you want to test how this stuff all works. Like, for example, could I take one of those patients and change a couple things? For example, like I did last time, could I take patient 1 and now assign to patient 1 these values? Now you notice these are highlighting red. Why are they highlighting red? Because they're not matching the values in the program. I didn't have getters or setters. I can't set the values. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So if I did want to be able to set the values externally, I would need to come in here and add set methods to match these. So I could hypothetically change it. But this is proof that because I didn't include them, I can't do that. But notice, this is really cool. Even right from here, I can create the method in the patient file right from here with Eclipse if I wanted to. Like, oh, wow, I need a setter. I could click the button and it'll set it. It'll create the whole thing for me automatically. Right. I'm not going to take that action. I just want to show you this is all you need to prove that it works. What we have on the screen here, this is all of it. Probably a whole lot less code than you thought it would be. All right, folks, that demonstrates exercise 4. We've run out of time. I'm sorry, but we can't do exercise 5 tonight. If you guys want help with that one, just hit me up and I will help guide you on that one. I can give you a couple of pointers on it, though, before we adjourn. So this is very similar to what we just did, where we're creating a class file, and then we're adding to it more class files, and then proving that it works. So there's an A and a B section on this one as well. And hopefully you don't have too many problems with this. What I will try to do is, and if you guys are game on this, is if anybody needs help with this particular one, this won't be due. I forget when this is due, actually. It's due next week sometime. We can get together during office hours if you want to get help on this, but I do not have a pre-recorded video for this, so you guys will be on your own a little bit. But if you follow the same kind of techniques and you're really careful about reading the language, you should be okay. But if you do get stuck, just reach out and we can do a one-on-one screen share. And maybe I'll get the impetus to record a video for it. So, all right, folks, that's going to wrap it for tonight. And this video is over right now.